Well, what is up, Raw and Real Entrepreneurs? I hope you are having an amazing day wherever you are in the world. And I'm back. You know, it's been a minute since our last show. I recorded almost 400 interviews for the podcast, and then my father passed suddenly. And if you've been a long time listener, you will know Joe was his name, that he was raising me as a single dad. And it was a gut punch on July 10th, 2024, when I got up and received that call. And I know some of you have aging parents, some of you have dealt with loss, and my heart goes out to you. And so when that happened, I was also spinning up my newest venture, the pause.ai. And what the pause is, it is making menopause care accessible for millions of women through a commercial app. So it's currently available in the App Store. Soon it will be available in the Play Store. And so I was building a company navigating grief and doing all of those things. And so the show paused for a minute, but we are back. And I'm so excited about this season's guests, and especially my guest today, who is absolutely remarkable. So let's get into the show. Today, I have the privilege of bringing on someone who is not just the founder and CEO of Navi Nurses, which is a rapidly growing private duty nursing company. She is someone who is a healthcare provider. She saw gaps in the system. She was a nurse at Barrow Neurological Institute, which is extremely prestigious, and the Mayo Clinic, where she focused on neurology, plastics, and ear, nose, and throat populations for 12 years. And it was during the pandemic that she saw so starkly what was happening in terms of patient care and at-home care, that she decided to make the leap. And in this episode, she's going to talk about what it's like to go from being an employee to an entrepreneur, calculated risk, dealing with scale, what happens when people leave or you have to let people go, and how she manages stress now compared to how she used to. So let's jump into the show with my friend and guest, the amazing CEO and founder of Navi Nurses, Jasmine Bhatti.
This is Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that brings the no-nonsense truth of what is required to start, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Susan Sly.
Okay, I'm back. It's been a minute, 400 shows, the downloads just growing, 141 countries. And I put everything on pause, literally, after my dad died. And as I've always said to all of you, hey, when you have to focus and life throws you a curve, it's time to prioritize. I got a company stood up. And during this entire time, I was thinking about all of you. I was thinking about the show, the global audience. And our first show back, there was one person at the top of my list, and she is here today, which I'm super flippin' fired up about. So Jasmine, welcome to Raw and Real Entrepreneurship.
Oh, thank you, Susan, for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Well, listen, first, you are like, when I first met you, you walk around and I think that literally angels follow you, and they're like, there's a light just on you. And I met you at an awards ceremony where you were receiving an award, and you have this like incredible, as we would say in French, this joie de vivre, this joy of living about you. And as I got to know you, and then you spoke at our FemTech event, you have an incredible story. And so you founded this company, Navi Nurses, which people are calling like the Uber for nurses. And I even feel that, hey, I use Uber. I love Uber. Disclosure, I don't own any Uber stock. I almost feel that's a downgrade, because I think what you're doing is so much more. But before we jump into Navi Nurses, like, when did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think my first experience with being an entrepreneur was actually being a Girl Scout, going door to door, like knocking and selling Girl Scout cookies. And I don't think there was like a clear point where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, I've been a nurse for almost 14 years now. And it wasn't until like just the constellation of things happened, like noticing problems in healthcare that I wanted changed and feeling like I couldn't do anything about it in the system, And then just working through COVID and like losing my soul through all of that just was like, I've got to get out like for my own health and well-being. And it was just kind of like, okay, I've had this idea for so long. Why don't I just take this opportunity, heal myself, and then just see what comes to it, like what happens with everything.
And I want to give a shout out to Girl Scouts, because I was a Girl Guide in Canada, and you get rejected. You would think everyone wants your cookies, but that's not true. Like that, not everyone wants your cookies. Like, it's like, I'm cute. I'm like, and facing that rejection, the door knocking, the like, yes, I want your cookies. It's a win, but no, I don't. I love that you brought that up, because I think that, COVID, especially too, I was having this conversation with a friend and about our kids, because I had one who graduated high school during COVID, one who graduated university, and there's a whole group of young people that, they were at home and they were sheltered. They didn't go out and knock on doors and sell cookies. They didn't get that experience and that grit. And we're starting to see some of that now. And I know we're going to talk about finding the right team members, and obviously, as you're growing the company, you're bringing on so many amazing people, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to ask you, Navi is disrupting this model of healthcare. And for the listeners who don't know about the company, how did you go from like, I have this idea to I'm actually starting a company? Because the statistic is 70% of Americans want to start a business, but less than, 7% actually do. So how did you become one of those 7%? Jasmine was like, this is my idea and I'm actually going to go for it.
Yeah, well, so much of it really is rooted in my own personal experience as being a family caregiver. So my grandmother was diagnosed with head and neck cancer. We took her home. And what we realized during that time period was that insurance covers almost nothing. And there were definitely time points where I was like, where else can we go? Like, there has to be more help and support. And that whole experience inspired me to become a nurse, but it also opened my eyes to the idea that I think there's a lot of shame in healthcare. We don't talk about things probably as often as we should, and caregiving is one of those spaces. And so my patients would always like tug at my clothes and say, hey, can you come home with me? And so what I had thought was that my problem that my family and I faced was just unique to us. Like maybe we just couldn't handle it. But in truth, there are millions of people that go home, and about half of the people that go home from a hospital don't even qualify for any support. That doesn't mean they don't want it or they couldn't benefit from it. Like we all can. And so just, it was just this idea, and working in a system can be difficult. Like you can have ideas, you can see problems, but where do you take it and who's going to pay attention to you? And there's like 500 things that the hospital is thinking about. Like, why are they going to listen to you? Like, why are they going to listen to me as a nurse? And so I just realized like, I had this idea, like I've got to take it. And I actually had a professor at ASU. So I'm trying to finish my PhD. And I was talking to this professor and he's like, I'm going to start connecting you to people in the startup community. And that's really how it started. It was someone else who said, hey, I know some resources. Let me share them with you. And for me, that was like what changed the game, because otherwise it is really daunting. Like, where do you start? Who do you talk to? What do you need? What do you do? And having some direction pointed towards me was really helpful.
So you see a problem, right? There's this whole thing with, entrepreneurs and solving a problem. And I'm going to give a mad shout out to Gregory Shepard, who has been here before. He's had so many exits totaling over $1 billion, and he's amazing. And one of the things he talks about is this story, Jasmine, of his mom when he's a little kid, and she's saying, who made more money, the people looking for gold and mining for gold, or the Levi Strauss company providing them all with jeans? And she's like, the chances of finding gold were very little, but the company saying everyone's going to need jeans, they're the ones who made all the money, right? Here's the company still going strong. I don't even know how old they are, but well over 100 maybe 50 years old. And it's the same thing. You see this problem, you know, the industry is ripe for disruption. It's a, you know, healthcare, it's a big monolith of an industry, but then you're like, no, I'm actually going to do something about it. Just kind of point me in the right direction. And, you know, just knowing you as I do, it's like, point me in the right direction. You're like a husky dog and I'm going to run in that direction and I'm going to go. So what were the first steps you took? And speak to, you know, we have a global audience, India, Nigeria, all over Australia, the UK, everywhere. Speak to the person listening who's like, you know what? I want to start a business. And like, Jasmine, I don't know which way to turn. What were those first steps you took?
Oh, it was like 100% just immersing myself into the community. And so for me, that was two communities, one being ASU, like the university that I'm at. And so tapping into the resources of the university was incredibly helpful. But then the community around me, like the startup community, which is filled with all of these other big like dreamers who have experience in so many different realms. And in becoming more integrated with the community, I started to think and see differently. And that was really, really pivotal for me, just to be surrounded by people who are really ambitious, they're excited, they're passionate, and they've had experience doing things before to help me potentially avoid mistakes or think about things differently. And so being connected into your communities, like that's the most golden piece. I don't think it matters what country you're in by any means, like finding that community. And now that there's so much available, even online, I think there's a lot of communities people can find virtually to help support them on whatever mission they're on.
I love that. And that's a testament to a brilliant entrepreneur. You're coachable, right? You're plugging into the community. It's not just showing up, but you're actually taking the advice and you're saying, okay, I'm going to do this. So you bootstrapped Navi Nurses. And so talk about the beginnings of the company, because for people, maybe they're listening, their first language is in English. What bootstrapping means is that you're putting up your own money, just like Sarah Blakely bootstrapped Spanx. She, put $5,000 in to build her prototypes. And then, the company is now, massive multi-billion-dollar company. So that's what it means, is you took your own resources to start it. So talk about starting it and bootstrapping it with your idea and your energy. And that's all there was.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. So everything kind of started towards, the idea really started during COVID. But it wasn't until the tail end that I finally was like, okay, I'm leaving. And that was actually really hard for me, because it was still the tail end of COVID and working as a clinician in the hospital. I felt actually a lot of guilt about leaving, because I didn't want to leave my colleagues, like, to finish up taking care of everything that's happening. That was probably the hardest barrier for me to overcome, was that guilt. But I knew that if I really wanted to build something that was going to make a difference, I needed to focus 100% on building. So I had set a point in time. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave the hospital by this date. I'm going to put in my 2 weeks. And I looked at it for like months ahead of time, and I kind of planned, like, because I was still working in the hospital, taking patients on the side, like figuring out, like, is this something I can do? And I had set the date based on just some sort of idea of, okay, I've got this many patients that we're caring for now. I think I'm going to be okay. And if it doesn't work out, I'm a nurse. I can still go back and practice in the hospital. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, I had something else to fall back on. Obviously being single, like, that's a little bit more difficult. Like, it's just myself, like, that's covering all of my expenses. So I didn't have anyone else to rely on. And that was also kind of scary to work through. But I think, again, going back to the community, you have people around you that help support and maybe give you different ideas to think through of, like, okay, is this the right time? And what resources do you have available around you to help support you through this process? But I had gone from working full-time bedside to like part, like taking care of clients on our own and still working at the hospital, to all of a sudden just full-time doing all of this.
Wow. And there's so many questions I have for you, and I want to unpack that a little bit. Like you said, you're single, it's just you, and it's harder, right? So we've had so many entrepreneurs on the show where they have had a partner who is working, right? So it does give that buffer. And by the same token, we've had those who are in your space, and it's just proof positive that if you're fiscally responsible, if you're deliberate, and you also have, you said you started in hybrid, right? So you went part-time, and you're kind of like also building your company part-time, which is what most entrepreneurs do that. So how did you find your first clients, and what was your pricing model?
Oh gosh. Okay. So first of all, like as nurses, it's really hard to charge for what we do. Like you just want to help everyone. And it was really hard for me to even come up with a number. So I just looked at like, what is the current rate for something similar? And I looked across the country, like what are people charging? And I just set a number that I thought was fair based on like current market trends. And we started at $75 an hour, which we're actually much farther beyond that now, just because we've had to build an infrastructure and a lot of other things. But that was really like how we set the pricing. And as far as like finding our first customers, I just actually turned to social media. I found some Facebook groups that were for senior care providers. And I posted, hey, I'm Jasmine, I'm a nurse. Here's like my philosophy. Here's what I'm doing. I'd love any referrals over. And actually, this December is going to be our 4-year anniversary of our booking of our very first client. And it's been an amazing whirlwind from there. And I think in healthcare, so much of what you do is built on trust and healthcare providers feeling comfortable with like, okay, I'm going to pass this person off to care to your hands to care for them. And when you can demonstrate that you can do that to their expectations and even higher, then people just start to come. And so much of our business, actually almost all of it, has been growth through word of mouth and just like that consistent referrals from people that know that we really provide great outcomes.
That's amazing. And I love what you talked about, like the pricing model, because the pricing is such an interesting thing, right? I was having this conversation with a friend about like pricing software, and in my previous world, we priced something that didn't exist, right? Like, how do you price it, or how do you benchmark it? And especially when you're opening a business in an area that doesn't have that business, then, how do you benchmark for, taking into account your geolocation and all sorts of other things, which is, and kudos to you for figuring that out. And then in terms of, initially, was your business all cash pay, or was there an insurance component to it? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so it's actually all been cash pay this entire time. And I think that speaks to the need that people are willing to pay for all of the support and guidance and nursing care that we can provide. Like, we're providing hospital level nursing care in the comfort of people's own homes, but on their terms. And it's so valuable. Like, we're helping them achieve a much greater quality of life for the person and their family, and preventing like readmissions and other complications. And so that's almost invaluable, really. Like, it's hard to put a price tag on peace of mind that we give to people and their families, or just giving them that permission to choose what's right for them. Like, those things are really important.
Oh, definitely. And when I think about my dad, so I've talked about Jasmine on almost every show. My dad, Joe, would come up, and the longtime listeners of the show kind of followed along in his journey. So a year ago, it was just almost like just over a year ago, he went into the hospital. And prior to that, we had an intervention with his doctor, and his doctor was like, Joe, if you go in the hospital, you are not coming out. And so he went in the hospital, and then we struggled to find an assisted living facility for him, because he was on a sliding scale of insulin. So there were a lot of very special aspects. But prior to that, the goal was to keep my dad in his house as long as possible with dignity. And, and he was in Canada, and I kept searching and searching. I'm like, I want a nurse to come in. I want to get the blood sugar readings, because I wasn't trusting him to actually give me his accurate readings. Love you in heaven, Dad. No, you lied to me. Anyway, I could laugh about it now, and we didn't have that. And to your point, there is such a need. And being in Gen X and the sandwich generation, still having kids at home, and at that point dealing with an aging parent, to not have that person to come in and take care of him medically, who would report and tell me what was going on. I mean, I love the need you're providing. So now we're coming, up to your 4-year anniversary. So talk about how you've still managed to bootstrap the company and still managed to grow. So how big is the team now, and approximately how many clients are you reaching?
Wow. So we have over 200 nurses now just here in Phoenix alone. And this year we've already surpassed over 30,000 hours of care provided just here in our own community. And again, it's like just been through word of mouth. And so we're just learning, what are people searching for? Because we're running a study. So I won this $1.5 million grant to study our work, because we were just seeing such incredible differences from both the patient as well as the nurse, which is really important. And along the way, we have done qualitative and quantitative work. So we've talked to people and asked them questions, and we've just looked at data. But in talking to people, they don't even understand what nurses can do. And all they understand is that when they're given the option to go home with a nurse, they're like, oh, I don't know how that's going to help me. But when they have the opportunity, they can't imagine going home another way because of the value that they provide. And so we're hoping that we can find ways to educate the community about what it is we do, why we're important, and really how we can help in so many ways. Because gosh, even as a profession, we haven't done a great job. Like, everyone sees us as just like hand holders, or we follow orders. But in fact, like, we are like your eyes and ears every second that you're in the hospital. All the small changes that we catch and coordinating all the care. I think we're so good at protecting you, like shielding you from everything that's happening, that you don't see all that we do, because that's not your job. Your job is to heal and get better. And so now my mission is I have to essentially rebrand nursing almost as a whole, not even just for the company, but how do we brand our profession in a way that people can recognize, so more people can find us, more people can learn like how we can help them, especially when healthcare is challenging, right? Like, going into a hospital is scary, and staffing impacts mortality. Like, we don't talk about that very much, but like, my dad spent a lot of time in the hospital over the last year too. So I 100% understand like how scary that is and how like vulnerable you feel. But when nurses aren't staffed in hospitals, well, people are more likely to die. And we don't talk about that, but that's why nurses go on strike. Like, we know that we can't give people the best care that they need and deserve. Sorry, this is like a whole long-winded answer.
No, and preach, because there's in the United States, there is a healthcare worker shortage, and it is only going to get worse. And even like with the pause, for people who don't know, that's the company that I've been building, but we look at the ratio of patients to certified providers in the US alone is 1 to 30,000, right? And so looking at that problem, like, how do we provide accessible support to women navigating perimenopause and menopause until they can get with a provider? And even then, the provider has limited time. So how can they continue to support them, right? And that's what we're built. That's what we did build and building still. But the piece around it, Jasmine, when I think about the growth, like, you go from, I have this idea and the professor points me in the right direction. Now you have 200 nurses working for you. What has been a big learning lesson for you in scaling a team? That's a huge scale. Most companies don't scale that fast. Like, what has been a big piece for you in terms of especially building team?
Oh gosh, just the importance of having the right people around you is so important. And I've come to realize that some people are here for part of the time. Some people can stay longer, right? I think there are some people that are really good at certain segments, and being okay with that has been like a big aha for me. Just, appreciating people for the significant ability of their contributions for a time period. But coming from healthcare, especially, and I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but there's this in nursing, we call it nurses eat their young. So we've got a lot of what we call lateral violence, where we don't help one another. We actually hurt one another. And so that's very pervasive in the nursing culture. And it exists, like there's a lot of talk about psychological safety in healthcare in general and why that's so important for patients. But what I've realized is that we have so many hospitals that they've got these great missions and visions and all these things that they're working towards. But then at the very basic unit, the people who are providing the care, they're not feeling safe. They are not like feeling worthy. And so I now get to create a culture where that's happening. Like, we value our nurses. We treat them as though they're worthy. And to see them come to life because people pay attention to them and appreciate them and value them, that's been just so beautiful to watch and see. It's unlike anything that I know I ever really experienced, and what many of my nurses don't. And so while building this team, that's been so beautiful for me. And I think that's also one of my biggest concerns going forward is, as we continue to grow and scale rapidly, how do I protect and just nurture this beautiful culture that is so important for the people who are working for us, but that ultimately impacts the patients we serve. And that's really important.
Yeah, that I hadn't heard that about the piece around nurses, right? My mother-in-law was a nurse. My mom was a nurse. My co-founder, obviously, at TBT is a nurse practitioner, Mia, who you met. And all I see is when I look at the people coming into the profession, and they have these beautiful hearts of service, and obviously there's a very attractive salary, especially for nurses now, just given supply and demand. But I also see the stress. I also see the being pulled on shift in so many directions. During the pandemic, we were working on using computer vision to help pre-screen patients because the nurses were so overtaxed. They needed to be saving lives, not pointing at people with an iPad and going, have you, had the sniffles last, whatever. And to your point, how do you create this culture of nurture? But I love what you said. I wrote this down, just appreciate people while they're there. Right. And as entrepreneurs, the people that take us to our company to a certain level are not always the people that are going to take it to the next level. And sometimes that can feel personal. Has it ever felt personal to you when someone leaves or when someone has to go?
It has. I actually had to exit my co-founder early on in building everything. And that was really, really, really hard for me. And I think that was my first taste of just, you can have the best of intentions and try to put everything together the way that you want. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. And that's okay, right? Like, you release them to go out and do what is so beautiful for them in their own life. And it allows you to continue to build and do what you're building. And it's just, you honor them for their contributions just for that time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know for myself, anytime that I've had to let someone go, and very candidly, this raw and real entrepreneurship, sometimes it's not been hard. Sometimes it's been really, really hard. And sometimes people who, I have the sense that people who are supposed to come back into your life, they do, right? Because especially in entrepreneurship, you're either learning or you're dying, right? Like if you're not growing as a founder, then your company's not growing either, right? So we all grow, we all shift, and we all change. And, there are seasons in all of it. Let me ask you this. I mean, okay, going back to, seriously, you to 200 team members, and I know you're growing like month over month because demand is not diminishing, right? So how do you handle stress personally?
Oh, I say all the time, I worked on a COVID unit in the hospital. There's nothing that's ever going to happen to me ever that's going to be anywhere near what I went through. And to help me like cope with everything that happened, I spent some time in Bali. I worked with some shaman, and I learned techniques to start to incorporate like actual mindful walking. There was like some chanting that we were taught, but just sitting out in nature for me, connecting back to my roots, like taking my shoes off, putting my feet on the earth. That is like so grounding, especially being out by water. Like that's usually where I go when I need time to just think, reflect, and I need to find peace for myself. But I also just had I'd lost control of my physical health during COVID too. Like you didn't see what I looked like, but I was like 50 pounds heavier because I just ate pizza and ice cream like every day during the pandemic. Like I'd come home, eat, and just like cry and like go to bed and wake up and do it the next day. And so since then, I've really been so much more mindful of like nutrition and eating, and really knowing that impacts my well-being, my mental clarity, my physical sense of self, my confidence. And so just taking the time to make sure that I'm putting in the right foods for me, still enjoying the things that make me happy. Like I still eat the chocolate. I still eat all the stuff I probably shouldn't, but like I balance it carefully. And staying connected. I think even working in the hospital, like I wasn't very good about keeping up with family and friends as much as I should. Family, absolutely. Friends, not quite so much. But now I'm a lot more intentional. I know that as an entrepreneur building a startup, my time is limited, and I now live off a calendar. Like I never did that before. I never used a calendar. But when I look at my calendar every week, I actually look to see, okay, which friends am I seeing this week? And so I'm really intentional about blocking out time for friends and people that are important. Like they lift my soul, and I know I can do the same for them. So the connection piece is just so critical for me.
Well, Jasmine, thank you for your vulnerability and your truth. And one of the pieces, especially for any entrepreneurs, for men and for women, is sometimes, we're working and we're grinding it out, and it can feel empty at times or lonely at times. And your experience in the hospital, I mean, my friends who were healthcare workers, it just incredible what happened to them. I was also trading emails with Lorna Breen's husband. She was the physician famously written about in New York Times who committed suicide. And you're right. Pizza and ice cream isn't the healthiest thing. It was the tool in your toolkit at the time, but you knew, and this is my PSA for anyone listening who is, and I've said this many times before, if you're that guy on the United flight at 6 a.m. pounding Bloody Marys, I've seen you. It needs to stop. It's not healthy. You've got 70 pounds and you're going to have a heart attack, extra overweight. But you knew it, you saw it, you recognized it. You said enough's enough. And I'm going to go on this journey. I'm going to make some changes. My question for you is, what's next? All of these entrepreneurs, it's like, okay, we're growing, we're scaling, Phoenix, the 5th largest city in America. And I know there's a lot of runway there, but what's next for Navi Nurses?
Oh my gosh. Like there's so much on the horizon. I think we're building out like a separate segment to our business, which is going to be focused on business to business. So not necessarily for the consumer, but there's ways that we can have organizations help fund and pay for this. So hopefully people don't have to pay so much out of pocket to get going. So that's really a route I'm looking at. Like, we are collecting evidence right now to hopefully create a code that shows that what we're doing should be covered by insurance. And so trying to lay the foundation for that to happen, because what we're seeing is that the way that we're delivering care is life changing. And not only is it life changing for people, but it's changing dollars, which that's like everything to the healthcare system. It's like we spend a fifth of all of our GDP in healthcare in the US. And so we can find ways to save these large systems a lot of money. And so just trying to build relationships to hopefully make those things happen, because every single person deserves like the level of care that we are providing for people in the way that we're doing it. So I think the partnerships is a big thing. What else is next? Oh my gosh, my role is always changing. That's the other interesting thing too, is so, I've gone from doing everything to now, how do I become like the face of the brand and changing the narrative? Maybe part of what we do involves changing policy or legislation. And so all of those things are on the table for what comes in the future. I don't know. I try to just take it like a few months at a time, because it's changing so rapidly. I can put ideas of like, here's where I want us to go. Here's where I think we're going to go over the next few months. But if something else happens, if a new door opens, then I may walk through it. I don't know. I think that's the other exciting thing about entrepreneurship is you pick which path you want to take. And there's so much you don't know yet, because those opportunities haven't been opened for you. But I think as an entrepreneur, your job is to try to find all of them, like find all the doors and then decide if you want to walk through them.
I love that, because it's the entrepreneurship has changed. Like one of my friends, he's like business plan, and he's been an entrepreneur now. It's Anthony Soho. He's just been appointed CEO of MoneyGram, and he's like business plan. I never show a business plan, because any entrepreneur who's like, this is my plan for the next 5 years, like no, like like how are you? The landscape is changing. So many things are changing, and so how are you supposed to seize those opportunities? So I love that. It's like, okay, I'm going to take a few months at a time, and I'm going to seize the opportunities. I'm going to call it and make sure that this opportunity in my discernment is this something that fits our brand, fits our growth trajectory, and so forth. Well, Jasmine, I freaking love you, girlfriend. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud that I get to know you. And and for everyone listening, I hope that this show has given you the courage to say, you know what, if Jasmine can do it, I can do it. You don't have to go and raise millions of dollars and start a huge company. You can do what she did, be discerning, do the hybrid approach until you get it going. So Jasmine, any final words for our audience?
Yeah, no, I think you just actually nailed it. Like, if I could have an ending, that would be it. Just like start, go and do it. And just, especially to other like females, nurses, minorities, like don't let anything hold you back. Like there are people in the community who want nothing more than for you to succeed. And so just know that they exist. You'll find your people, and you'll get the support you need. So just start. But thank you so much for having me, Susan. Like, it's an honor to be able to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, just start. I love that. Just start. And for everyone listening, if this show has helped you, we would love a 5-star review. So please do give us that. Share the show, tag us on social. All of Jasmine's social will be in the show notes. So check those out. Check out our past episodes for continued inspiration so you can be crushing it on your own raw and real entrepreneurship journey. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you in the next episode.